Hello, my name is Elizabeth, and this is my 8 to 10 minute persuasive speech for Intro to Public Speaking. Here I have my 3 note cards. As you can see, they are just front, no back, and they are just key phrases along with sources. So this will be a truly extemporaneous speech, and I will be speaking freely from my knowledge and what I have gained through the research I've done for this presentation. My topic for today's speech will be on marijuana, and more specifically, the legalization of recreational marijuana. So I firmly believe that recreational marijuana should be legalized in our country, and I hope by the end of this speech to either persuade to you that legalization should happen for recreational marijuana, or at least bring up some points that would cause you to stop and consider your own stance, if not truly persuade you to adopt mine. So most everyone in our country has heard of pot or weed, Mary Jane, or cannabis. In fact, in the survey I conducted for this class, 100% of the people who took it said that they both knew what marijuana was and they knew someone who had used it recreationally. So it's obviously not a very obscure thing in our culture, but not everyone is familiar with what marijuana itself is. So all these names are a form of marijuana, and they all come from a plant called the cannabis sativa plant. And most commonly in our country, this plant is harvested and then dried up and ground to be smoked. And it can be smoked in many different forms, such as a joint, a blunt. It can be put in a bong or a pipe, but it can also be baked into like cookies and candies and in the form of edible marijuana, as well as more highly concentrated forms such as wax, dab, and rosin. And what makes these more concentrated and more potent is that they have a higher level of THC. So THC is the chemical compound in the cannabis sativa plant, and depending on the form that you use marijuana in, it needs to be heated. So for example, when you're smoking it, if it's ground up or put into like a pipe or a bong, it has to reach a certain temperature, and then the THC releases those chemical and neurotransmitters in our brain, and those cause the psychedelic effects that are kind of similar to with alcohol being drunk. And with the more highly concentrated forms, such as wax or dab, they have to be heated to much higher temperatures, and when they release a much higher level of that THC, so their effects are felt much more strongly. In our country, we have 2 types of marijuana, and that's medicinal marijuana and recreational marijuana. Obviously, medicinal marijuana, as the name suggests, is used for medical purposes, and it can be prescribed by doctors and psychiatrists. And it's used for the health benefits, because marijuana does have some certain health benefits. One is a pain reliever, but what makes marijuana recreational would be when it is used solely for enjoyment. So alcohol would be a recreational drug. People use that. They go out and have drinks with their friends because they enjoy being drunk. And so recreational marijuana would be the same thing, used purely for enjoyment. And in today's speech, I will be arguing for the legalization of this marijuana being used recreationally. Medicinal marijuana has been far more legalized in our country. It has not been nationally, but many states have laws that protect the use of medicinal marijuana. And so my first reason why I believe that recreational marijuana should be legal is because when it is compared to alcohol, which has been legal for some time, it is not nearly as bad. So obviously alcohol is legal in our country for people ages 21 and up. However, it wasn't always like that. There was a prohibition in the early 1920s that essentially criminalized the manufacturing, distribution, and use of alcohol. And this didn't last for very long. The prohibition was repealed, and so alcohol is now legal for people over the ages of 21. And what we're seeing in our country today is that marijuana is no worse. In fact, it is significantly better than alcohol in terms of the number of deaths that it can cause and the harms behind it. So from healthline.com, one thing that's been proven is to date, there are no deaths caused simply by the use of too much of this marijuana or cannabis. So it's never been the sole reason that someone has died. However, from the CDC, we see that 2,200 deaths occur every single year from alcohol poisoning, which means that people have died purely because they drank too much alcohol. So what this shows us is that alcohol, which is legal, is obviously killing much more people than marijuana. Marijuana has never killed someone purely from an overdose. Another thing we see is in the case of DUIs, which is driving under the influence, the influence is the key word there. That could be from drugs or alcohol. And the majority of those incidents are exactly from alcohol, not from marijuana. Another leader in the United States death rates is liver disease, and liver disease is caused by the use of drinking too much. And another thing we see in our country is that 3 to 4 times more people have a dependency on alcohol than marijuana. Another thing that would make it more safe if marijuana were legalized for recreational use is that if it was legal, this weed can be regulated, and so it can be put under guidelines. When it's illegal, obviously it's not going to stop people from trying to acquire the drug. For example, in the Prohibition, there were speakeasies and secret bars where people would get alcohol illegally. And today there are obviously illegal drug deals going on with marijuana. And so when people are buying marijuana off the streets, they don't know what they're getting. They don't know if this stuff has been laced or if it has, like dirt and contaminants that could make it potentially harmful. However, when it would be legalized, it could be placed under federal guidelines that secure that the drug that's being sold is up to standard and that it's not harmful in that way. Another reason why I believe that marijuana should be legalized for recreational use is the increased revenue that our country is going to gain from it. So from procon.org, which is powered by Britannica, they estimated that by the year 2025, if we legalize recreational marijuana, our country would see a $24 billion revenue from this. So because it's being legalized and these guidelines are being put in place, our country would gain $24 billion. And given how much debt our country is currently in, this amount of money would be incredibly beneficial to the United States. Another benefit is that many studies have actually found that as marijuana is legalized for recreational use, the teen use actually goes down. So because alcohol is legal in our country, it's not just anyone can have it. You have to be above the age of 21. So I'm not arguing that marijuana should be legal for everyone. I believe that the age for use should be 21. And so if we are legalizing it, these studies were done in Colorado and Washington. It was found that when they legalized recreational use, teen use and this underage use actually went down by 7 to 12%. So in this study, we see that by legalizing it, we are actually causing the people who shouldn't be using it, those teens and young adults who are not fully matured, they're not going to be using it as illegally. To summarize, marijuana should be legalized for recreational use. When you look at alcohol, which we have in our country today, alcohol is much more dangerous. In fact, a clinical psychiatrist said that sugar actually poses a bigger national threat to our country than marijuana does. And so I believe that marijuana should be legalized for the reasons that alcohol is much more dangerous, and legalizing it would actually make it more safe because we can put those regulations and guidelines in place, as well as the fact that it would reduce underage use. Thank you for listening to my speech.